Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
It was early spring at Hogwarts Castle, the kind of season when the wind still carried a bite of winter, but the grounds had begun to wake in green and gold. Crocuses burst between the flagstones, owls swooped lazily above the great lake, and even the whomping willow seemed to rustle with something like good humor. Inside the castle, though, whispers had begun to stir. Strange happenings were not unusual at Hogwarts, but this was different. It began, as many oddities did, with a few frightened first years. On a Tuesday morning, 3 Hufflepuff girls had gone to fetch their broomsticks from the storage room near the greenhouses. They'd returned pale and wide-eyed, insisting they'd seen tiny green goblins scuttling along the corridor walls. Professor Sprout had chuckled kindly and suggested it was a trick of the light. But later that same evening, her prized seedlings in Greenhouse 3, rare temperamental plants she'd been tending for months, had vanished without a trace. By breakfast the next day, the entire castle was buzzing with theories. Peeves claimed he'd seen little leaf legs marching in rows beneath the suits of armor. The portraits muttered among themselves, and even the ghosts seemed unsettled. Harry Potter had learned over the years that when Hogwarts grew uneasy, it usually meant trouble was brewing. He sat at the Gryffindor table, absently poking at a piece of toast while Hermione pored over the Daily Prophet beside him. "It says here," she murmured, "that several magical greenhouses in Devon were also broken into this week. Plants stolen. Rare ones, too. This can't be a coincidence." Ron looked up from his plate, half a sausage still on his fork. "So what? You think a bunch of plants are running around nicking other plants now?" Hermione gave him a look. "I'm saying someone might be using them or controlling them. There's something strange about the timing. Sprout's plants go missing, and then these things start showing up in the corridors. It fits." Harry didn't answer right away. He was watching the enchanted ceiling, which today shimmered with soft clouds drifting over blue. But for the briefest second, a shadow passed across it. Not a cloud, not a bird. Something else. He frowned. "Whatever it is," he said quietly, "I don't think it's finished." That afternoon, after Defense Against the Dark Arts, they went down to see Professor Sprout. The greenhouses smelled of damp soil and dragon dung compost, familiar and comforting. But the moment they stepped inside, the warmth turned uneasy. Pots lay smashed across the floor, and several tables were streaked with something faintly luminous, a green, misty residue that clung to the air like smoke. Sprout wiped her brow with a gloved hand and sighed. "Vanished, all of them. My moonseed ferns, grave moss, and 3 lumos lichen bulbs, not a single leaf left behind." Hermione crouched near the residue, careful not to touch it. "Professor, this glow it's magical, isn't it?" "Indeed. I've never seen anything quite like it. I thought perhaps Peeves had been playing about again, but this feels older, wilder." Harry leaned closer. The faint mist seemed to pulse, almost as if alive. "Did you notice anything else? Sounds? Movement?" Sprout hesitated, then nodded. "A rustling, like hundreds of tiny feet on stone." I called out, but when I turned, nothing. That night the castle grew strangely quiet. The torches in the corridors flickered lower, and the air carried a faint, grassy scent, as if the forest had crept closer to the walls. Harry lay awake in the Gryffindor dormitory, listening. The others were asleep, their breathing soft and even. But he could hear something faint beyond the window, a faint tapping, irregular but steady. He rose, wrapped his robe around him, and crossed to the glass. The moonlight poured over the lake below, silver and smooth. And there, upon the window's edge, something small and green clung to the stone. It was no larger than a mouse, with long, twig-like limbs and bright, glassy eyes. It blinked once at him, then vanished into a curl of mist. Harry drew back, heart pounding. He knew what he'd seen, and it hadn't been a trick of the light. By morning, he told Hermione and Ron everything. "It sounds almost like a bowtruckle," Hermione said thoughtfully. "But they don't turn to mist, and they don't steal things." Ron scratched his head. Could it be something from the forest? You know, one of Hagrid's lot? "Maybe," Harry said. "But I think whatever it is, it came into the castle for a reason." That day, rumors spread faster than Filch on inspection day. Green mist had been sighted in the dungeons. A pair of Ravenclaws swore they had heard scratching under the floor of the library. Even the suits of armor seemed to creak more than usual, as though something unseen brushed past them. Professor McGonagall called an emergency meeting at dinner. Her expression was grave. Students are to remain in their common rooms after curfew until further notice. Prefects will escort you between classes. There will be no unsupervised trips to the lower corridors. That night the castle shuddered. A low tremor passed through the walls, soft but enough to rattle the window panes, and from deep below a strange sound rose up, a long, hollow note like a sigh. The next morning, Neville Longbottom burst into the great hall, pale and trembling. "Professor Sprout," he gasped, "it's the greenhouses again. But this time there's something alive in there." And as the students rushed after him, they saw, just for a heartbeat, a flicker of green darting between the shadows of the glass walls, too fast to follow, too strange to name. Something had awakened beneath Hogwarts, and it was only just beginning. The morning that followed was anything but ordinary. Clouds hung low over the castle, heavy with the promise of rain, and the students' chatter carried a nervous edge. Everyone was talking about the creatures, or rather the thing that had been seen in the greenhouses. Harry, Ron, and Hermione hurried down after breakfast, robes flapping behind them. Professor Sprout was already there with Neville and a cluster of fifth-year Hufflepuffs. The air smelled sharply of wet moss and ozone and something faintly metallic, like the tang of lightning before a storm. The greenhouse glass was fogged, streaked with a faint green glow that pulsed from within. Harry pressed closer, peering through the mist. Shapes moved inside, dozens of them. Small, glimmering figures darted among the overturned pots, creatures with skin the color of emerald glass and eyes that shimmered faintly gold. They were slender and quick, with spindly arms and hands that left faint trails of light as they moved. "Merlin's beard," Professor Sprout whispered. "There must be 20 of them." Neville tugged on her sleeve, his voice unsteady. They aren't attacking the plants. They're arranging them. And indeed, the creatures were. They moved in strange patterns, placing shards of pots and bits of leaves in swirling circles across the floor, as though building something. "Are they dangerous?" Ron asked. "They don't look it," said Hermione, though her tone was cautious. But neither did Cornish pixies, until they destroyed half of Lockhart's classroom. Sprout raised her wand, hesitating. "We can't simply drive them off. They might react badly." "Let me try," Harry said. "I've seen them before, or one of them." He stepped forward slowly, wand lowered. The creatures froze. The glow dimmed slightly, and one, larger than the rest, with spined ridges along its back, turned toward him. For a long moment no one moved. Then the creature's chest began to pulse faintly with light, and a low humming filled the room. It wasn't unpleasant, more like the sound of wind through a flute. The other creatures echoed it, a soft chorus that made the glass walls tremble. Hermione whispered, "It's communicating." The humming grew sharper until a single word formed, a whisper that wasn't quite a voice, but every student there heard it. "Below." Then all at once the creatures scattered. They darted through cracks and windows, dissolving into mist before vanishing into the castle's lower air. Silence fell. Only the echo of the strange word remained, heavy as stone. "Below," Ron muttered. "Below what?" Harry already knew. "The castle," he said softly. "They're going underneath." That evening, the trio sat before the common room fire, maps spread across the floor. Hermione had found an old drawing of Hogwarts foundations from the library archives, one inked centuries ago by a headmaster long forgotten. "There are dozens of tunnels beneath the school," she said, tracing with her finger. "Some connect to Hogsmeade, some lead into the Forbidden Forest. But look here. This one runs beneath the greenhouses and stops abruptly." Ron leaned over. "So, maybe it caved in? Or maybe it was sealed," Harry murmured. A log cracked in the hearth. Shadows danced across the walls. "What if these creatures came from there?" Hermione said. "If they were trapped for centuries, experiments gone wrong, or magical beings forgotten, and something disturbed the seal." "Like Sprout's new roots," Ron finished. "Or maybe Peeves knocking something loose." Harry looked toward the window. The rain had started, a steady drizzle against the glass. "We need to find out what's under there." By midnight, they were in the corridors again. The castle was hushed. Only the distant groans of shifting stone echoed from above. They carried their wands low, moving swiftly past slumbering portraits. Near the greenhouses, the air felt colder. The faint green mist clung to the stones, swirling around their feet. "Lumos," whispered Hermione. The wand light caught on the damp flagstones, and something carved there, half hidden by moss. A serpent. Its coils spiraled into a pattern that formed an S, old and worn. "Salazar Slytherin," she breathed. Ron groaned. "Oh, brilliant. Not another secret Slytherin hideout." Harry crouched beside the carving, tracing it lightly. The stone felt warm beneath his fingers, faintly humming with life. "There's a charm here. A warding spell. Old magic." Hermione lifted her wand. "Revelio." The lines of the carving flared green, spreading across the ground like cracks in ice. Slowly a square outline appeared, a hatch, its edges sealed with centuries of dust. They exchanged glances. Then Harry reached for the latch. It opened with a low, aching sound, and a rush of damp, cold air spilled out from below. The passage descended steeply into darkness. They climbed down carefully, the ladder slick beneath their boots. The deeper they went, the colder the air grew until their breath came out in faint clouds. At last, they stepped into a tunnel lined with stone so ancient it glittered faintly with veins of quartz. "Where do you think this goes?" Ron whispered. I don't know, Harry said, but look, there's light ahead. A pale green shimmer flickered in the distance. They followed it cautiously, the tunnel bending and narrowing until it opened into a vast underground hall. It was immense, larger than the Great Hall itself, the ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood a circular pool, the water perfectly still and glowing faintly green. Around it, carvings covered the walls. Serpents, vines, and strange symbols that seemed to move when looked at too long. And floating above the pool were the creatures, dozens of them circling slowly, their light reflecting off the water. Hermione's breath caught. "It's beautiful," she whispered, but Harry felt something else beneath the beauty. A pulse of unease, a wrongness that tugged at the air. The creatures were restless, their light flickering. Suddenly the water stirred. A ripple spread across the pool, then another. "Something's coming," Harry said, stepping back. The glow deepened, turning from green to a dark, oily hue. Then, with a shuddering sound, a column of liquid rose, forming the shape of a great serpent, its body made of swirling water and shadow. The creature shrieked, scattering in all directions. The serpent's eyes flared bright emerald, locking on the three of them. Hermione raised her wand. "Protego!" The shield sprang up just in time. The serpent struck, its watery coils crashing against the barrier with a sound like thunder. The impact threw them backward. "Run!" Harry shouted. They bolted for the tunnel, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Behind them, the serpent roared, a sound that seemed to shake the very bones of the castle. They didn't stop until they reached the hatch above and slammed it shut, panting, hearts hammering. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Ron croaked, "What was that?" Harry looked back toward the sealed floor where the faintest trace of green mist still curled between the stones. "I don't know," he said quietly. But whatever it was, those creatures were running from it. And above them, far down the corridor, came a faint sound, a soft, wet drip, as if something had followed them up. The corridors of Hogwarts had always carried secrets, but that night the castle seemed to breathe them aloud. The air was damp and heavy with mist, and every step Harry, Ron, and Hermione took echoed like a warning. They had sealed the hatch behind them, but it no longer felt like safety. The green glow had seeped through the cracks in the stones, pulsing faintly as though alive. By morning it was gone. Yet no one slept soundly that night. At breakfast, the tension in the Great Hall was almost visible. Students spoke in hushed voices. The older ones kept glancing toward the staff table where Professors McGonagall and Sprout sat in urgent conversation with Hagrid. Even the ceiling reflected the unease. Storm clouds rolled endlessly across its enchanted sky, muting the sunlight into a pale, sickly hue. Harry kept his eyes on his plate but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Once, he caught sight of a faint shimmer of green light beneath the teacher's dais, gone as soon as he blinked. "Did you see that?" he whispered to Hermione. She nodded, her face pale. "I've been seeing them all morning. Little flashes. It's spreading." Ron frowned. "Maybe we should tell McGonagall what's down there." "The serpent thing." Harry shook his head. "Not yet. We don't know what it is. If we tell her without proof, they'll seal off half the school. Maybe even send everyone home." "Would that be so bad?" Ron muttered. But Hermione's gaze was fixed on the staff table. "Look, Sprout's leaving." Indeed, the herbology professor had just stood, her expression grim. She strode quickly from the hall, her hat bobbing slightly as she disappeared through the side door. Harry's gut tightened. She's going back to the greenhouses. They caught up to her near Greenhouse 3. Rain still fell in thin sheets, the air thick with the scent of wet earth. Sprout moved with purpose, wand drawn, muttering incantations under her breath. "Professor," Hermione called, "please wait." Sprout turned sharply, eyes wide and fierce. "You three shouldn't be here. The grounds aren't safe." "We know what's happening," Harry said quickly. "We saw them, the creatures. They were hiding something below the castle." Her face changed at once. "Below?" "There's a chamber under the greenhouses," Hermione said. "Old, sealed. The creatures came from there. And something else was down there too. Something dangerous." Sprout's wand hand trembled slightly. "I've tended these grounds for 20 years. If something has awakened beneath them..." She didn't finish. Instead, she turned toward the greenhouse door. "Show me." They hesitated, but she had already swept inside. The greenhouse was eerily quiet. Pots had been overturned again, soil scattered across the floor. The air glowed faintly with greenish vapor. Hermione's wand light caught movement, faint ripples across the soil, as though something small burrowed beneath it. Then the sound came. A faint hiss, distant yet unmistakable. Sprout raised her wand. "Stay back." The floor cracked open. From the earth, a tendril of mist rose, thickening into a translucent vine that writhed like a living thing. It twisted upward, forming the outline of a humanoid shape. Within its chest glimmered a soft green light, pulsing, rhythmic, alive. The shape spoke, its voice whispering like leaves in wind. "Return the roots." Sprout stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head, the glow inside it shifting. "Guardians, bound by the Founder's hand. The roots must remain beneath." Hermione's eyes widened. "The creatures, they're guardians, protectors of whatever Slytherin sealed down there." The figure's light flared briefly. "The serpent stirs. The soil weakens. We cannot contain..." The words ended in a tremor. The glow flickered, and the shape collapsed into mist, vanishing into the ground. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Sprout turned to them, her expression grave. "Whatever this is, it's not simple mischief. If Slytherin himself sealed it, there's reason to fear its return." By afternoon, the rumors had become impossible to ignore. Students claimed to hear slithering in the walls, to see eyes gleaming from shadows. The prefect struggled to keep order, but fear was spreading faster than reason. That evening, McGonagall called another meeting in the Great Hall. The teachers sat at the front, faces tense. "The castle will remain under protective watch," McGonagall announced. "Prefects will double patrols. No student is to approach the greenhouses or the lower dungeons." Harry exchanged glances with Hermione and Ron. They knew what was coming. At midnight, they slipped out again. The rain had stopped, leaving the ground slick and gleaming under moonlight. The castle loomed behind them, silent and watchful. They moved quickly to the hatch behind the greenhouses. It was still sealed, but the stones around it had cracked further. A faint green glow seeped from below. "This can't wait," Hermione said softly, "if the guardians can't contain it." Harry knelt, tracing the sigil with his wand. The serpent carving pulsed faintly as though recognizing him. Then with a soft groan, the hatch opened again. Cold air spilled out, and something else. A faint rhythmic beating, like a distant heartbeat echoing through stone. They descended. The tunnel felt alive this time. The walls shimmered faintly, pulsing in time with the sound. Veins of glowing green light ran through the rock like living roots. When they reached the chamber, the pool had changed. Its waters no longer glowed softly, but swirled violently, the surface boiling with energy. The creatures, the green guardians, circled above it frantically, their lights flickering like candles in a storm. The serpent, Ron whispered. It's still there. As if summoned by the words, the pool surged upward. But instead of a serpent, a column of water formed into a human figure, cloaked in shadow and mist. Its voice filled the chamber, deep and resonant. Who disturbs my slumber? Harry took a step forward. We don't mean harm, but you're hurting the guardians. They said they can't contain you. The figure's eyes, bright as emerald flame, fixed on him. They were made to serve. I am what remains of his will. The last echo of Salazar Slytherin. Hermione gasped. An echo? You're a memory? A fragment, it said, bound in water and earth, chained beneath the school. When the seal broke, I awoke. Why were you sealed? Harry asked. The chamber trembled, as if the question itself stirred the stones. To guard the roots, the echo said, power older than Hogwarts itself. The founders hid it beneath the soil, for even they feared its strength. Then why are you rising now? Hermione asked. The echo's voice darkened. Because the roots are dying. Magic fades when the soil is starved. The castle's heart weakens, and I must renew it. Renew it how? Harry demanded. The water shuddered, rippling outward. With life, with sacrifice. A tremor ran through the ground. The guardians screamed, their light flaring in alarm. The pool expanded, water climbing the walls. Run! Hermione shouted. They scrambled back toward the tunnel as water surged behind them, cold and relentless. The echo's voice followed, echoing through stone. The roots must drink, or Hogwarts shall fall. They burst into the night, drenched and gasping. The hatch slammed shut behind them, sealing with a hiss of steam. Ron coughed, wiping mud from his face. I'm starting to hate basements. Hermione's eyes were wild. He means to drain something. Life from the school itself. If we don't stop him, Hogwarts will die. Harry looked back at the ground where faint green mist curled upward like smoke. No, he said quietly. Not while we're here. And somewhere deep beneath their feet, the heartbeat continued, steady, growing stronger. The dawn after that dreadful night rose gray and thin, veiling the towers of Hogwarts in a mist that clung like smoke. The castle had grown uneasy, its very stones seeming to hum faintly with power. The portraits along the staircases whispered among themselves, and the ghosts drifted in restless circles, their pale forms wavering like candle flames. Harry barely slept. He dreamed of serpents winding through the corridors, of roots that pulsed like veins beneath the floors. When morning came, he and his friends met in the common room, their eyes shadowed with fatigue. Hermione spread open a thick tome she'd found in the library's restricted section. A heavy, iron-clasped book that smelled faintly of damp parchment and old herbs. The pages were yellowed, and its title had been worn to a blur. I stayed up all night reading, she said, her voice hushed but urgent. There's mention of something called the Verdant Core. It's old magic, older than the Founders. It was believed to be the life force that feeds the land around Hogwarts. Ron frowned. The life force? You mean, like Trees and dirt? Not just that, Hermione said. Magic itself. According to this, Hogwarts was built on top of it. The castle draws energy from the core. That's how it stays alive. How enchantments renew. How walls heal. How spells cast here last longer. If Slytherin sealed something down there, he must have been guarding the core. Harry leaned closer. And if that echo, whatever it is, says the core is dying, Hermione nodded gravely, then Hogwarts itself might be weakening. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind howled faintly against the windows, carrying with it a whisper of rain. Ron rubbed his eyes. So what do we do? Go tell McGonagall? She'll think we've gone barmy. She'd have to see it to believe it, Harry said quietly. And by then, it might be too late. The day passed under uneasy silence. Lessons carried on, but students kept glancing toward the windows, as though expecting the castle to shudder again. During Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall's wand flickered once mid-spell, something it never did, and a look of faint alarm crossed her face before she quickly moved on. At lunch, the enchanted ceiling had gone almost entirely gray. Clouds swirling but never breaking. Hagrid appeared briefly at the staff table, speaking in low tones to Sprout. His brow was furrowed, and though he tried to smile when he saw Harry, there was no cheer in it. After classes, the trio slipped away. The corridors were emptier than usual. Even Peeves was absent, as though the very mischief had drained out of the castle. They made for the library first, hoping to find more about the verdant core. Madame Pince eyed them sharply but said nothing, only tightening her shawl as they passed. Hermione worked feverishly, her wand casting faint golden light over the pages. She flipped through old records of Hogwarts' founding, parchments copied from the founder's own writings. Here, she whispered, listen to this. She read aloud, voice trembling slightly. 4 built the bastion upon the heart of the isle where magic runs deep as blood. The roots must be guarded, for in them lies the breath of all enchantments. Let none disturb their slumber, lest the land wither and stone crumble to dust. Ron swallowed. That sounds like a warning to me. Harry nodded. And we've already disturbed it. That night, as they prepared to return to the hatch, Harry caught sight of something strange outside the window, a faint trail of light winding across the grounds, vanishing into the forbidden forest. Hermione, he whispered, look. The trail pulsed faintly green, the same hue as the creature's glow. They're moving, she said. The Guardians, but why? They said the soil weakens, Harry replied. Maybe they're trying to protect what's left. Ron groaned softly. If they're going into the forest, that can't be good news. The 3 of them crept from the castle once more, slipping beneath the cloak and through the dew-drenched grass. The moon hung low, caught between torn clouds. The air was colder now, tinged with the smell of damp leaves and the faint metallic scent of magic. They followed the glowing trail, across the grounds, past the greenhouses and down toward the shadowed edge of the forest. The trees loomed tall and black, their branches whispering softly. Lumos, Harry murmured. Their wand lights glimmered off trunks slick with rain. The path twisted deeper, and soon the faint pulse of green light became stronger, leading them into a clearing they had never seen before. At its center stood a massive tree, old and twisted, roots gnarled like coiled serpents. Its bark shimmered faintly, and from its heart poured a soft green glow. The Guardians were gathered around it, moving in slow, deliberate circles, humming that same eerie tune they had heard before. Hermione's voice trembled. "It's part of the core. It must reach into the forest." As they watched, the light within the tree flickered weakly. The roots shifted, groaning deep in the earth. Then the ground cracked. A wave of energy burst outward, knocking them off their feet. The guardians screamed, high, keening cries that sent flocks of birds bursting from the treetops. From the fissure rose dark tendrils of mist, coiling upward like smoke. The mist took shape, the same serpent-like form they had seen in the chamber, larger now, darker, eyes blazing like molten emeralds. Harry leapt to his feet. "It followed us!" "No," Hermione gasped. "It's spreading!" The serpent reared, its body rippling like liquid shadow. Its voice rolled across the clearing, deep and cold. "The roots hunger." The guardians surged forward in a flash of light, throwing themselves at the mist. The air filled with bursts of green fire as they collided, their bodies shattering into sparks. Hermione raised her wand. "Protego totalum!" A dome of light flared around them, shielding them from the shock wave. The serpent hissed, its form twisting violently. Harry shouted over the roar, "There's got to be a way to stop it!" Hermione's face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. "If this thing is tied to the core, we can't destroy it. We have to restore the balance. It said the soil was dying." Ron yelled, "And how do we fix the soil?" Hermione's gaze darted to the tree. "With roots." Before Harry could stop her, she dashed forward, wand blazing. She struck the ground beside the tree, chanting rapidly under her breath. A surge of golden light burst outward, sinking into the roots. The serpent shrieked, a sound of fury and pain. It lunged toward her, but Harry raised his wand and shouted, "Expulso!" The explosion tore through the air, knocking the shadow back. The guardians rallied, their lights growing stronger. The clearing pulsed with green and gold as the mist creature began to unravel, its body splitting apart into wisps of smoke. Hermione fell to her knees, exhausted, but smiling faintly. "It's working." The light from the roots flared one final time, blinding in its brilliance. And then all fell silent. When the light faded, the serpent was gone. The clearing was still, the great tree now glowing softly, its bark renewed, the cracks sealed. The guardian hovered a moment longer before dissolving gently into mist. Harry looked around, chest heaving. "Is it over?" Hermione shook her head slowly. "No, the forest's roots may be healed, but the core beneath the castle is still wounded. We only stopped it from spreading." Ron groaned, wiping his face. "So we've got to go back down there, haven't we?" Harry nodded grimly. "Yes. Back to the chamber, to the heart of Hogwarts itself." The moon broke through the clouds, its light glinting on their faces. In the distance, the castle stood silent and dark, but faint green mist was curling once more from its highest towers, as though the very air within had begun to breathe. And somewhere beneath its ancient foundations, the heartbeat of the verdant core throbbed louder than before. By morning, the castle had begun to tremble faintly, a shiver that ran through its walls like a sigh. Dust fell from the ceiling in the corridors, and the staircases groaned more loudly than ever. Yet somehow, life at Hogwarts went on. Classes were not canceled, students whispered of storms in the forest, and claimed to have seen ghostly shapes drifting through the grounds at night, but the professors offered no explanation. Harry, Ron, and Hermione knew better. They had felt the pulse of the verdant core and had seen the shadow that called itself the echo of Salazar Slytherin. They had watched the forest heal and the guardians vanish into mist, but peace was not what lingered in the days that followed. The magic of Hogwarts itself seemed strained. Candles in the Great Hall flickered and went out mid-meal. Staircases refused to move, trapping students for hours. The portraits, even the most solemn of them, muttered restlessly, their painted faces pale. And in the library, a faint green glow had begun to seep from beneath the floorboards. "We can't wait any longer," Hermione said one evening, spreading a fresh map across the table in the common room. "If the core is truly beneath the castle, then the main chamber we found was only the outer layer. There must be something deeper." Ron leaned over her shoulder. "Deeper? You mean even further underground? Brilliant. Why not just dig our way into the planet's core while we're at it?" Hermione ignored him, tracing the lines of an old blueprint. "According to this, there's a sealed substructure beneath the dungeons, a network of tunnels that predate the school. Look here, this passage leads directly beneath the lake, and from there into what the document calls the root vault." Harry frowned. "Root vault? That sounds like exactly where the verdant core would be." Hermione nodded. "If the echo meant to renew it by taking life from the castle, the vault would be its center." Ron sighed. "And let me guess, we're the ones who have to stop it?" No one answered, because they all already knew. They prepared in silence. Hermione packed her satchel with potion vials and old scrolls. Ron gathered a handful of galleons, just in case we need to bribe a ghost, and Harry checked that his wand was steady in his grip. When night fell, they left the common room under the invisibility cloak, the fire behind them dying to embers. The castle was still awake in strange ways. The suits of armor whispered faintly, their visors glinting in the torchlight. Somewhere above, a corridor door creaked open by itself. They moved through the dungeons, past the damp stones that led toward the Slytherin common room. Here the air grew colder, sharper. Hermione's wand light caught strange runes carved into the wall. "These weren't here before," she murmured. The runes glowed faintly green, spreading downward in a spiral pattern. "Looks like a trail," Ron said. "A creepy curse trail, but still a trail." They followed it until the corridor ended abruptly at an old iron gate, rusted shut. The serpent motif was unmistakable. "Slytherin's mark again," said Harry quietly. Hermione studied it. "It's sealed by Parseltongue magic. You'll have to open it, Harry." He hesitated. He hadn't spoken the serpent's tongue since the war. The sound of it had always made his skin crawl. But he stepped forward, placed his hand against the gate, and whispered, "Open." The metal shuddered. The serpent's eyes glowed green, and with a deep groan, the gate slid open, revealing a passage so dark it seemed to swallow the light. They descended once more. The tunnel twisted downward in a slow spiral, the air growing heavy with the scent of damp stone and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. After what felt like an hour, they emerged into a wide cavern. It was not like the first chamber. This place pulsed with raw energy. Roots hung from the ceiling like tangled webs, dripping with green luminescence. Pools of shimmering liquid collected in the cracks, casting reflections like shifting glass. Hermione whispered, "It's beautiful and terrible." At the far end of the cavern stood a structure of black stone, a pedestal atop which lay a crystal orb glowing faintly with green light. "That must be the core," said Harry, but the light within it was uneven, pulsing weakly, as though the thing itself were dying. They stepped closer, and a sudden wind rose. Though there was no source for it, the roots trembled, and the light from the pools began to darken. Then, from the shadow behind the pedestal, the echo appeared once more. It was taller now, its form more solid, the face half-shaped from water and smoke, but unmistakably human in outline. The voice that followed was calm and cold. "You should not have returned." Harry raised his wand. "You said the core is dying. Tell us how to save it." The echo regarded him unblinking. "Save it? Foolish boy. The core is not meant to be saved. It must be reborn. Renewal demands sacrifice." Hermione's eyes blazed. "Sacrifice of what?" "Of life," the echo said simply. "The castle's magic has grown stagnant. The founders fed the core with their power once. That bond has long faded. Now it must feed on new life to endure." Ron took a step back. "You mean us? You mean the students?" The echo's voice deepened, reverberating through the walls. "The castle is alive because you are alive. The magic of one sustains the other. Without offering, both shall perish." Harry's stomach clenched. "You're wrong. There has to be another way." "Then watch it die," said the echo. The cavern shuddered. The pools of liquid surged, their color turning dark and viscous. The roots above them began to wither, curling inward. From the orb atop the pedestal, a crack split down its center, spilling light like blood. "Harry!" Hermione cried. "If it breaks, the castle could collapse." Harry's mind raced. The founders had sealed this place for a reason. Not out of cruelty, but protection. The core needed balance, not destruction. If Slytherin's echo sought only power, then they would have to give it what it feared most. Unity. He turned to Hermione. "We need to restore what the founders gave it, together." Her eyes widened. "The 4 houses." "Yes," said Harry, "their magic combined." "But how?" Ron demanded. "We don't have the other founders' relics." Hermione's mind worked quickly. "The Sorting Hat. It carries the essence of all 4. Gryffindor's courage, Hufflepuff's kindness, Ravenclaw's wisdom, Slytherin's ambition. If we bring it here—" A tremor interrupted her, sending chunks of stone crashing from above. "We haven't got time," Ron shouted. Harry's jaw tightened. "Then we'll use what we have." "We're Gryffindor, aren't we?" He raised his wand, pointing it toward the orb. "Together." Hermione and Ron lifted theirs beside him. 3 lights flared, gold, silver, and scarlet, merging into a single brilliant beam that struck the orb squarely. The echo screamed, its form rippling like shattered glass. The light intensified until the cavern was blinding, the roots above surging with color once more. Then, silence. The air stilled. The echo was gone. When their eyes adjusted, the orb no longer glowed green, but a warm, steady gold. The withered roots had begun to bloom again, tiny leaves unfolding along their length. Hermione let out a trembling breath. "We did it." Ron leaned on a rock, pale but grinning. "Next time I vote we let Hufflepuff handle the gardening." Harry smiled faintly. But deep within him, unease remained. The echo had vanished, yes, but its words lingered. Renewal demands sacrifice. As they made their way back through the tunnel, the castle above them groaned again, but softer this time, almost content. Still, when they emerged into the night, the air was heavy with mist, and the faint scent of earth clung to the wind. From far below, deep within the foundations of Hogwarts, A single heartbeat echoed once more, not dying this time but alive, waiting. The day that followed felt strangely calm, almost hollow. The storm that had hung over Hogwarts for weeks had lifted. Sunlight glimmered through the high windows of the great hall, and laughter cautiously returned to the tables. Yet beneath it all, Harry sensed that the castle itself was merely resting, not healed. The teachers acted as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Professor McGonagall's expression had softened, but she still walked with the tight-lipped resolve of someone guarding a great secret. Only Sprout looked truly shaken. Her hands trembled faintly when she poured tea, and her eyes wandered toward the windows, overlooking the greenhouses far too often. To most of the students, the trouble seemed over. The green mist had vanished, the trembling of the castle had stopped, and the air no longer thrummed with that strange living pulse. But for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, it was a quiet before another storm. They met by the lake that afternoon, the wind rippling the water into dark, glassy waves. Ron hurled a pebble into the shallows. "So that's it then, isn't it? We've fixed it. Core's happy, castle's fine, no one's dead." For once. Hermione didn't answer right away. She was staring across the lake toward the forbidden forest, where the tree line shimmered faintly in the light. "It isn't that simple. The magic might be stable, but we didn't restore it the way the founders did. We only patched it, like mending a broken spell with another spell. It'll hold for now, but it won't last forever." Harry nodded slowly. "You think the Echo is telling the truth? That the core still needs something more?" Hermione sighed. "Yes. Renewal demands sacrifice. That's what it said. I don't know what kind, but magic that ancient never fades entirely. It always leaves a mark." A hush settled between them. The sound of the lake lapping against the shore was steady and low, and somewhere far across the water, the giant squid stirred lazily. "I can live without any more marks," Ron muttered. "We've all done enough sacrificing for a lifetime." Harry gave a faint smile, but his thoughts lingered on the chamber, the Echo's words, and the strange heartbeat beneath the earth. That night, a thick fog rolled across the grounds. It wasn't the bright, shimmering mist of the creatures, but a dull, heavy gray that swallowed the castle walls. Harry woke before dawn, with the uneasy feeling that something was calling him. He sat up, listening. The dormitory was silent, save for the soft snoring of Seamus and Dean. But beyond that silence came another sound. Faint, rhythmic, pulsing, a heartbeat, not loud, but steady. He rose, slipped on his robe, and crept to the window. The fog outside glowed faintly green. "Not again," he whispered. By the time Hermione and Ron joined him in the common room, the light had faded, but he could still feel it. That pulse, faint beneath the floor. "You heard it too?" Hermione said, eyes wide. Harry nodded. "It's stronger this time. The core's waking again." They made for the dungeons before sunrise. The castle was silent and cold, its torches dimmed to embers. Their footsteps echoed faintly as they moved through the lower halls. The gate Harry had opened before was still ajar, but the air beyond it no longer felt empty. It breathed, a slow, unseen movement, as though something vast waited in the dark. When they reached the cavern, the sight froze them in place. The golden light they had left behind had dimmed to a sickly green once more. The orb, once whole, now pulsed unevenly, cracks spiderwebbing its surface. The roots that had flowered in renewal hung limp, dripping with something dark and viscous, and at the far end of the chamber, where the echo had once stood, a new figure waited. It was not shadow this time, but form. A man robed in green and black, his face pale as moonlight and eyes gleaming like polished jade. Harry's wand was in his hand before he could think. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "I am what remains of what he was, the memory-given body. You have stirred the core, and in doing so, you have stirred me." Hermione's breath caught. "You're Salazar Slytherin." The figure inclined his head. "Once, or what time has made of him. When I sealed the core, I bound part of my spirit here to guard it. The others would not understand the depth of its power. It is alive, yes, but it is also hungry." "We saw what it did," Harry said sharply. "It tried to consume the castle." Slytherin's echo regarded him calmly. "It consumes to live, as all living things do. The founders knew this. Each gave their magic willingly to sustain it. But centuries have passed. Their power has faded. The core is starved." Hermione's voice was steady but low. "So you want us to feed it?" The man's eyes flicked toward her. "Not all. Only one." Harry's grip tightened on his wand. "No." Slytherin's smile returned, faint and knowing. "You misunderstand me, child. It need not be death. It asks only for the giving of magic, a bond to sustain its life. But such magic must be pure, drawn from courage and sacrifice." Hermione turned pale. "You mean it wants someone to surrender their power to it?" "Yes," said the echo softly, "to bind their soul to the roots of the castle, as the founders once did. It would be an unending tether. The chosen one would live, and yet not live. Forever a part of Hogwarts." Ron's voice broke the silence. "That's not happening. Not again. We've done enough binding and tethering for one lifetime." Slytherin's gaze rested on Harry. "And yet, you are already bound to this place. Its magic knows you. The castle itself listens when you walk its halls. You have fed it before, with bravery, with loss, with love. The choice is already made." The words hung in the still air like frost. Harry felt the echo of the heartbeat in his chest. Not his own, but something deeper, older. The castle pulsed faintly in answer. "No," he whispered. "There has to be another way." "Then watch it die," Slytherin said again, voice colder this time. "The core cannot endure without a living bond." The orb shuddered and the chamber trembled violently. The roots writhed, striking the stone like whips. Hermione clutched Harry's arm. "If it collapses, the whole castle might go with it." Slytherin's form began to fade into mist, his voice echoing faintly. "Choose quickly, or the heart of Hogwarts will turn to dust." Then he was gone. The tremors grew stronger. Stones fell from the ceiling, shattering across the floor. Hermione shouted over the noise, "Harry, we can't stay. We need time to think." But Harry's gaze was fixed on the orb. It flickered faster now, as though beating in rhythm with his heart. He raised his wand slowly. What if it's not about giving life, but sharing it? Hermione blinked. What? If it feeds on connection, on what the founders shared, maybe it doesn't need a single sacrifice. Maybe it needs unity again. Ron looked doubtful. "And how exactly do we do that?" Harry stepped forward. "Together, same as before, but this time not to destroy or to seal, but to join." He held out his hand. Hermione took it without hesitation. Ron groaned, muttered something about being utterly mental, and grabbed the other. They raised their wands, their magic intertwining. 3 beams of light: scarlet, silver, and gold. The cavern filled with warmth, and the heartbeat grew stronger. The orb glowed, cracks sealing as new light poured through it. not green, but golden white, pulsing gently. The roots quivered, then burst into life, blooming with tiny blossoms that glimmered like stars. The trembling stopped. The air fell still, sweet and clear. Harry let out a long breath, the weight lifting from his chest. The echo of Slytherin was gone, and for the first time, the heartbeat beneath Hogwarts sounded calm, steady, alive, whole. Hermione smiled faintly. "You were right." Ron nodded wearily. "For once, I'm glad you didn't listen when I said to run." Harry turned toward the glowing orb, the core's light reflected in his eyes, soft and endless. "Maybe that's what it needed all along," he said quietly. "Not sacrifice, just unity." And far above, through the castle's countless walls and towers, Hogwarts itself seemed to exhale, a long, slow breath of relief that drifted through every corridor, every classroom, every stone. The castle was alive again. The castle awoke slowly, like an old creature stirring after a long slumber. For days after the restoration of the verdant core, a peculiar stillness lingered over Hogwarts. Not the tense silence of fear, but one of deep, ancient calm. The walls no longer trembled. The torches burned steadily. Even the portraits seemed brighter, their colors richer, as though they had been washed clean of dust and shadow. To the students, life returned to normal. Lessons resumed, laughter once again filled the halls, and the strange events of the past weeks faded into half-remembered rumor. But for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, there was no forgetting. They could feel it. That subtle hum in the air, the pulse beneath the stone floors. The castle was breathing again, its heart alive and listening. Harry, sitting by the window of the Gryffindor common room one evening, watched the snow begin to fall outside. The season had turned, the lake was frozen at the edges, and the trees beyond the grounds glittered faintly with frost. He should have felt relief, peace even. But there was something else stirring deep inside him. He could feel the core, not constantly, not painfully, but faintly, like a heartbeat just beneath his own. "You still hear it, don't you?" Hermione's voice broke through his thoughts. She approached quietly, holding a steaming cup of tea. He nodded. "Not hear it exactly. It's more like feeling it, as if the castle knows me now." Hermione sat beside him, watching the snow fall. "It does. We gave a part of ourselves to it, not a sacrifice, but a bond. The core responds to that kind of magic. It's what Slytherin meant, though he twisted it. Connection is a form of power." Ron joined them a few moments later, a plate of biscuits in hand. "Well, I don't feel anything except hungry. If the castle wants to thank me, it can start by making dinner last a bit longer." Hermione rolled her eyes, but even she smiled faintly. For a few precious hours, it almost felt as though their days of danger were behind them. But peace never lingered long at Hogwarts. 3 nights later, the first sign appeared, faint ripples spreading across the frozen surface of the lake, though no wind stirred the air. By dawn, the frost that covered the castle grounds had taken on a faint green tint. Professor Sprout was the first to notice something wrong. During her morning rounds, she found several of her plants blooming out of season, brilliant emerald blossoms that shimmered faintly in the dim light. When she touched one, the petals quivered as though alive, and a pulse of warmth spread through the soil. Word spread quickly, and by midday, the greenhouses were crowded with curious students. Harry and his friends arrived just as McGonagall did, her sharp gaze sweeping the rows of glowing plants. "Has anyone been experimenting again?" she demanded. Sprout shook her head, still staring at the blossoms. No, Minerva. These grew overnight. Look, they're not like anything I've ever cultivated. Hermione crouched by one of the pots, brushing the petals gently. The plant responded instantly, curling toward her hand. A faint shimmer of light passed between them. "It's magic from the core," she whispered. "It's spreading upward through the soil." McGonagall's eyes narrowed. "And is that safe?" Hermione hesitated. "I'm not sure." That night, the glow spread beyond the greenhouses. Fine threads of light crept along the outer walls of the castle, winding through cracks and creeping vines. They weren't ominous, not like the mist from before, but strange and beautiful, like veins of living emerald stone. Students gathered by the windows to watch. "It's almost pretty," Lavender murmured, "like the castle's blooming." But Harry felt a twist of unease. The magic was alive, yes, but alive things could grow out of control. By morning, the light had reached the great hall. The stone columns shimmered faintly with green, and the enchanted ceiling above flickered between sunlight and shadow. "Blimey," Ron muttered as they entered for breakfast. "It's like we're eating inside a salad." Hermione frowned. "It's drawing energy from the core again, but why? We stabilized it." "Maybe it's celebrating," Ron offered weakly. "Or maybe," said Harry quietly, "it's changing." Later that day, Professor McGonagall summoned them to her office. The walls were lined with books and maps of the castle, and the headmistress stood beside one such map, her expression grave. "This is no ordinary disturbance," she began, gesturing to the glowing parchment. The image of the castle shimmered faintly, and tiny threads of green light pulsed through it, moving like veins through a living body. "These readings are coming from every foundation of the castle, the great hall, the dungeons, even the towers. The magic is expanding." Hermione stepped closer, eyes wide. "It's reaching for balance, connecting itself to the rest of the castle." McGonagall nodded. "Perhaps, but it's also unpredictable. If the magic continues to surge at this rate, it could overwhelm the wards protecting Hogwarts. The core may no longer be content merely to rest." Harry looked at the map again, watching the lines pulse. "It's waking up fully." McGonagall's eyes softened slightly. "You three have always had a peculiar relationship with this school. I suspect it knows you better than most. If it continues to grow unstable, I may need your help again." "We'll be ready," Harry said, though his heart was heavy. That evening, the castle was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind outside had died. Harry sat awake in the dormitory, listening to the faint hum that vibrated through the floor. The others slept, but he could not. The sound was rising again. The heartbeat of the core, stronger, faster. He rose and crossed to the window. The night was filled with faint green light. Threads of it ran across the lake, tracing lines over the ice. Then, without warning, the light shifted, rippling outward in a single pulse that washed over the grounds like a wave. "Harry!" He turned sharply. Hermione stood in the doorway, pale in the glow. "You felt it too?" He nodded. "It's spreading faster." Together they crept down the stairs and through the silent corridors. The air was thick with magic. Their wands hummed faintly at their sides. When they reached the entrance hall, they stopped in awe. Every stone in the floor glowed faintly, light running between them like water. The grand staircase shimmered as though alive, its railings blooming with tiny green blossoms. Ron joined them moments later, rubbing his eyes. What in Merlin's name is going on now? Hermione's face was pale but calm. It's the core's magic, but not destructive this time. It's transforming the castle, spreading life through every stone. Like a living organism, Harry said quietly. They stood together watching as the light pulsed gently through the walls, breathing, growing. And for the first time, Harry didn't feel fear. He felt wonder. The magic was not wild or cruel, but purposeful, renewing what centuries had worn down. The Founder's enchantments had awakened again, and Hogwarts itself was reborn in color and light. Yet far beneath their feet, deep in the Chamber of Roots, the orb pulsed once more. Golden white, then green again, as if something ancient was stirring in its heart. For though Hogwarts had awakened in life, not all who slept beneath it had done so in peace. Winter deepened over Hogwarts, but the castle was not asleep. Snow blanketed the roofs and spires, softening the sharp edges of stone. Yet beneath that white stillness, the ancient magic continued to stir. The green glow that had begun as faint veins along the walls now shimmered in quiet harmony with the torches, as though the castle itself had found a new rhythm of life. To most, it was a marvel. The younger students whispered that Hogwarts was breathing again, that the warmth in the corridors meant the castle was happy. Even the ghosts seemed lighter in mood. Nearly headless Nick reported that the dungeons no longer felt quite so cold, and the Bloody Baron, to everyone's shock, had begun appearing in the Great Hall for meals, silent but calm. Yet Harry could not shake a lingering unease. He and Hermione often met in the library after curfew, poring over the oldest texts they could find. The Verdant Core's revival had healed the school, yes, but magic that old never worked without cost. The Founder's enchantments had bound their own strength to the roots of the land. What had Harry, Hermione, and Ron bound without knowing? Hermione turned a brittle page in a cracked leather tome one evening, candlelight glinting off her quill. "Listen to this," she murmured. "It's from the journals of Godric Gryffindor himself, one of the few still intact. The core remembers its guardians. To awaken it is to awaken the spirits who once protected it. The land shall not sleep unguarded." Ron, who had been leaning back in his chair with his feet on the table, frowned. "So what does that mean? The core's gonna grow another bunch of leaf-legged lizards to guard it?" Hermione shook her head. "Not creatures this time, guardians, beings of magic and memory. Echoes, perhaps, like the one we saw of Slytherin, but Gryffindor implies they're meant to protect, not harm." Harry's gaze drifted toward the window, where frost traced branching patterns across the glass. If the core is awake, maybe the guardians are wakened too. The next morning brought proof. Classes had just begun when the first screams echoed through the corridors. Students spilled from the classrooms near the dungeons, faces pale. By the time Harry and his friends arrived, the crowd had parted around something extraordinary. Floating above the floor like a wisp of mist, it was shaped like a person, though its body shimmered faintly with green light. Its eyes burned golden, and its voice was low, almost musical. "Fear not," it said, and the words carried through the corridor like a sigh of wind. "We mean you no harm." Professor Flitwick hurried forward, wand drawn. "Who or what are you?" The figure bowed its head. We are the keepers of the roots, the old guardians of this place. We wake because the core stirs. The castle breathes anew. Then as quickly as it had appeared, it faded, leaving behind only a faint scent of earth and rain. Hermione clutched Harry's sleeve. It's happening. The core's power is reweaving the castle, even its ancient protectors. Ron swallowed. So long as they stay friendly, I'm fine with that. But the unease in Harry's chest grew heavier. He could feel the heartbeat again, that deep, slow rhythm beneath the stones. It was stronger now, faster, as though something vast was moving in its sleep. Days passed. The green glow settled into the very heart of Hogwarts. The walls seemed warmer. Light passed through the castle in soft pulses, almost like breath. Yet strange things began to occur. Books in the library opened themselves at night, turning to pages filled with ancient runes. The staircases shifted even when no one walked them. And in the great hall, ivy had begun creeping up the stone pillars, sprouting tiny blossoms that released faint sparks of light. Students marveled, teachers worried. Then one evening during dinner, the enchanted ceiling flickered, for the briefest moment showing not the winter sky, but a vast green forest stretching endlessly in all directions. The illusion vanished, but not before the hall was filled with whispers. What was that? Ron hissed, staring upward. The castle, Hermione said softly, her brow furrowed. It's remembering. The next night, Harry woke again to the sound of footsteps, soft, measured, echoing in the corridor beyond the Gryffindor dormitory. He slipped from bed and followed them, wand in hand. The footsteps led toward the entrance hall. When he reached it, the torches flared to life on their own, revealing a figure standing in the center of the floor. It was tall and cloaked, but not ghostly. Its form shimmered faintly, woven of starlight and emerald mist. "Who are you?" Harry called. The figure turned, and beneath the hood, he saw not malice, but a face carved from calm authority. Old, proud, and strangely familiar. "I am the keeper of the North Wing," the figure said, voice low and resonant. "Once I was of the living, sworn to guard this place. I wake now because the heart calls, the verdant core beats once more." "You're one of the guardians," Harry said. The keeper inclined his head. "The first to rise, others will follow. But not all who slumbered will wake in peace. The magic you reawakened stirs both light and shadow." Harry's stomach tightened. "What do you mean, shadow?" But the keeper's form began to fade, his voice growing distant. "Every heart has its darkness, young heir of courage. The core remembers all, even the pain buried deep within its roots." Then he was gone, and the torches dimmed to their usual glow. The following morning the castle trembled again, not the violent shaking of before, but a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from the very foundations. Dust drifted from the rafters. The portraits whispered in alarm. In the great hall, students clutched their goblets as the tables rattled. McGonagall rose at once, her sharp voice cutting through the noise. "Remain calm. The wards are holding." But Harry could see faintly the reason for her concern. The green light that had glowed so gently through the walls now flickered like lightning, and beneath the calm surface of that glow, he could feel another pulse. Darker, slower, heavier. 2 heartbeats. Hermione caught his arm. "It's dividing. The core's balance. It's being torn apart again." "How?" Ron demanded. "We fixed it." Hermione's voice was barely above a whisper. unless something else woke beneath it. That night, they gathered by the lake again, the ice gleaming faintly beneath the stars. The castle loomed behind them, its windows glowing with a strange living light. "We restored it with unity," Harry said quietly. "Maybe that light wasn't just ours. Maybe it woke everything, good and bad." Ron shivered, rubbing his arms. "So what now? Another trip underground? Because I'm starting to think Hogwarts has more basements than classrooms." Hermione looked toward the castle, her breath misting in the cold. "If the core remembers all, then we have to remind it what balance truly is. Not light or dark, both together. That's what keeps it alive." Harry nodded slowly. "Then we'll remind it." They turned back toward the castle, where the faint glow pulsed through the towers like veins of fire and emerald. Hogwarts was changing again, and whatever lay beneath its roots was stirring once more, waiting for them to return. Winter held the highlands in its frozen grasp, yet Hogwarts glimmered like a beacon in the dark, alive, shifting, strange. From a distance, one could mistake the castle for a living thing. Faint veins of green light coursed through its walls, and the air around it shimmered faintly, like heat over stone. The students had grown used to it now, though whispers of the waking magic filled every corridor. Harry, Hermione, and Ron were not fooled. They knew the castle's heartbeat too well. The soft, low thrum beneath their feet when the halls fell silent, the whisper of air that moved as though guided by thought. And lately, that heartbeat had begun to stutter. They met again in the library, huddled at their familiar table in the shadow of the tall, frost-touched windows. Hermione had brought stacks of ancient texts, many written in Latin or runes so old they were barely legible. She rubbed at her temples, exhaustion lining her face. "The core is dividing," she murmured. "The Guardian's light is growing dim. Gryffindor's writings spoke of it once. When the land's heart was unsettled, the magic split itself in two halves, creation and decay." Ron frowned, his voice thick with worry. "So one side's keeping the castle alive, and the other's trying to tear it down?" "Exactly," Hermione said. "We restored the balance once, but we didn't cleanse it. The shadow that lingered beneath, Slytherin's echo, perhaps even older than him, it's feeding on the same power that sustains Hogwarts. It's becoming its own force." Harry's hands tightened around the parchment he held. "And if it wins," Hermione met his gaze, "then the core will turn inward, the castle will live, but twisted, bound by dark magic, a living fortress that devours everything within." Ron swallowed hard. "Well, that sounds cheerful." That night, the first sign of the shadow appeared. It began in the lower corridors, where the air had always been cold and damp. Students passing near the dungeons reported hearing whispers, faint at first, then louder, as though the walls themselves spoke. When Filch went to investigate, he returned pale and trembling, muttering that the stones had moved under his feet. The next morning, frost crept up the inside of the castle windows, etched with strange, twisting patterns, serpents, coils, roots. "Not again," Ron groaned as they studied one such window. "After charms," Hermione traced the pattern carefully. "It's the same runes we saw in the chamber, or in the old magic of binding. But this isn't random, it's forming a seal." Harry frowned. "A seal to keep something out. Or in." Neither of them answered. By evening, even the portraits had grown restless. The fat lady refused to guard the common room, claiming she had heard hissing behind the frame. The gray lady drifted silently through the corridors, her ethereal form flickering, as though the very magic that bound her to the castle was faltering. And then, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, the castle itself groaned. The sound was deep and mournful, shaking the very air. Candles flickered out. Dust rained from the ceiling. Students screamed as the floor of the great hall rippled like water. The floating candles fell one by one, extinguishing in midair. Harry, Hermione, and Ron burst through the doors moments later. The hall was empty save for the teachers, McGonagall, Sprout, Flitwick, and Hagrid, who stood at the center, wands raised, faces pale. "Stay back," McGonagall barked. Her wand traced a glowing arc in the air, sealing the doors behind them. "What's happening?" Harry shouted. "The core," Sprout said, her voice trembling. "It's rejecting the magic. The roots beneath are twisting, half of them trying to grow, half to wither." The floor shuddered again, and faint green light spread in thin cracks along the stones. The teachers exchanged fearful glances. Flitwick whispered something in ancient tongue, casting a charm that steadied the walls, but it was only a temporary reprieve. Hermione stepped forward, determination flashing in her eyes. "We need to go back to the chamber. If the core's splitting, we can't fix it from up here." McGonagall's gaze was sharp. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." But Harry spoke before she could continue. "We started this. If we don't stop it, no one will." There was silence. Then, reluctantly, McGonagall lowered her wand. "Then you must take this." From the folds of her robes, she drew out a small crystal vial filled with faintly glowing light, neither gold nor green, but a soft, steady white. "What is it?" Hermione asked. "The combined essence of the Founder's relics," McGonagall said quietly. "I gathered what fragments remained. The hat, the cup, the diadem, even the sword's residual magic. It is the legacy of Hogwarts itself. Perhaps it will answer to you." Harry took the vial with reverent hands. The light pulsed faintly against his skin, warm and alive. The descent into the lower tunnels was like walking into a dream. The walls shimmered faintly and the air was filled with a hum that vibrated in their bones. The runes that had once sealed the path now blazed with light, half green, half black, warring against one another. The deeper they went, the louder the sound grew, the twin heartbeats thundering in uneven rhythm. When they reached the chamber at last, they stopped in horror. The verdant core had changed. Where once there had been a single orb of golden white light, there were now two. One still glowed bright and pure, the other dark and pulsing, its light a deep emerald, so rich it seemed to bleed shadow. The roots of the chamber twisted around them both like serpents, locked in combat. Ron whispered, "It's split itself." Hermione nodded grimly. "Creation and decay, life and death. It's trying to choose." But the two halves were not equal. The dark orb pulsed faster, spreading tendrils of mist that curled along the floor. The guardians, faint, luminous figures, hovered nearby, flickering like dying candles. One turned toward them, its voice echoing faintly. "The shadow must be undone. The core cannot sustain division." Harry looked down at the vial in his hand. The light within shimmered, gold, silver, green, blue. 4 colors, 4 legacies. He stepped forward. "Then we'll give it what it's missing." Hermione caught his arm. "Harry, wait. You don't know what it will do." He met her eyes. Neither did they. the founders, but they believed in balance. That's all we can do. He uncorked the vial. Light poured out, filling the chamber in a blinding rush. It struck both orbs at once, gold and green fire intertwining, roaring through the roots. The ground heaved beneath them. The air grew heavy and warm, pulsing with energy. The two orbs clashed, then began to merge. Hermione cried out as the light enveloped them, searing and pure. The sound of the heartbeats grew louder, faster, until they became one. Then, silence. When the brilliance faded, only one core remained. Not golden, not green, but a soft, silvery white that filled the cavern with peace. The roots stretched outward, glowing faintly, alive once more. Harry fell to his knees, breathless. The vial in his hand was empty. Hermione reached for his shoulder. "You did it. It's whole again." Ron, panting beside them, managed a weak grin. "Next time, let's save the castle without nearly blowing it up, yeah?" But Harry barely heard him. The heartbeat was steady now, soft and sure. Hogwarts lived, not divided, not enslaved, but whole. And as they climbed back toward the surface, faint dawn light breaking through the stairwell, Harry thought he heard the castle whisper, not in words, but in feeling. "Thank you." The ancient walls exhaled a single sigh, and for the first time in centuries, the heart of Hogwarts beat as one. Morning came like the soft lifting of a veil. A pale sun rose above the mountains, gilding the snow-draped towers of Hogwarts in gold. From the outside, all was calm. The lake lay frozen and still, and the banners in the great hall stirred gently in the warm breath of enchantment. To the students, it was just another day of lessons and chatter. But for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, the castle's silence was filled with meaning. The heartbeat was gone, or perhaps, at last, it had become so perfectly in rhythm with their own that they no longer heard it. The repair of the core had changed more than they could yet understand. In the days that followed, small wonders appeared everywhere. Stone walls that had been cracked for centuries grew smooth and whole. The ivy clinging to the castle walls flowered in winter, bright white blossoms that glowed faintly by moonlight. Portraits that had faded with age regained their color. Even the ghosts seemed to move with new strength. They spoke of feeling light again, as if the air itself had grown softer. For the first time in many years, Hogwarts felt happy. And yet peace is a fragile thing. In a place as old and full of memory as that castle. Hermione noticed the first change. She was walking alone through the courtyard one evening when she heard it. A faint, low humming from beneath the flagstones. It was not the wild pulse of the core, nor the ominous rumble of magic breaking apart. It was almost like a melody, distant and patient. She stopped and pressed her hand against the cold stone. The vibration thrummed gently beneath her palm, alive and rhythmic. It sounded almost like words, but not in any language she knew. The next morning she found Harry and Ron by the fire in the common room. "The core is speaking again," she said softly, sitting beside them. Ron groaned. "Oh, not this again. I was just starting to sleep properly." Hermione ignored him. "I think it's trying to communicate. I read that when old enchantments reach harmony, they can begin to weave. Well, almost like song. The core isn't in danger, it's singing." Harry frowned. "Singing?" She nodded. "The magic of creation always finds rhythm. The founder's spells were cast through chant and voice. That's why ancient runes often rhyme. The core is alive now, in balance, so it's expressing that power in the only way it knows." Ron muttered, So Hogwarts has turned into a giant humming songbook. Brilliant. But Hermione's words stayed with Harry. That night, as he walked alone through the halls, he could hear it too. Faint, distant, flowing through the stones like a whisper of wind through leaves. It was soothing, almost familiar, and when he paused to listen, it seemed to weave itself around his heartbeat. Spring came early that year. The snow melted from the towers, the lake thawed, and a strange, luminous mist rose from the forest at dawn. The castle bloomed, quite literally. Patches of green sprouted between stones that had been bare for centuries. Hagrid could hardly contain his delight. "Never seen nothing like it," he told them one afternoon, gesturing proudly at the vast carpet of moss and silver ferns spreading across the grounds. "The core's magic must be feeding the whole place. It's like the forest and the castle have decided they're cousins again." But with that growth came something stranger still. The castle began to change. Not in any way the teachers could control. Staircases that had once twisted unpredictably now shifted in graceful arcs like moving vines. The walls shimmered faintly when touched, and new corridors appeared. Not dark, forgotten ones, but bright and airy, lined with fresh stone that smelled faintly of earth after rain. "It's remaking itself," Hermione said, wonder in her voice. "As if it remembers how it was meant to be." Ron looked uneasy. "You make it sound like it's got plans." Hermione hesitated. "Maybe it does." That night, the humming grew louder. It wasn't just a faint vibration now. The whole castle seemed to resonate with sound. Students woke in their dormitories to a faint rising melody. No words, only harmony, vast and ancient. The chandeliers swayed in rhythm. Books rustled on their shelves, and the portraits leaned forward in astonishment. In the great hall, the teachers gathered in haste, wands drawn. McGonagall's voice carried through the hall. "Stay calm. It's not an attack. It's the castle's own magic manifesting." Flitwick's eyes shone with awe. "Remarkable! The harmonic energy of foundational enchantments. This is the purest form of ancient magic I've ever felt." And then, without warning, a beam of white-green light shot upward through the very center of the hall, piercing the enchanted ceiling and disappearing into the sky. The ground trembled, but not violently, more like the deep inhale of a living thing. Harry, Hermione, and Ron ran in moments later just as the light faded. "What happened?" Harry demanded. McGonagall looked at him, her expression unreadable. "It seems Hogwarts has completed what you began. The castle's magic has aligned with the land itself." Hermione stared up at the ceiling, where stars glimmered faintly through the fading beam. "It's joining with the world around it," she said. "When we restored the core, we only healed Hogwarts, but the core is older than the school. It belongs to the earth beneath. The balance we created is spreading beyond these walls." Ron whistled softly. "So Hogwarts is singing to the world now." "Or calling to it," Harry said. Over the next week, strange phenomena rippled through the countryside. The forbidden forest grew brighter, its paths lined with blossoms that glowed faintly in moonlight. The centaurs watched from the trees in solemn silence. Owls flew at all hours, their hoots carrying melodies that echoed faintly with the core's song. But it was the lake that changed most of all. One morning the water shone clear as crystal, and from its depths faint shapes could be seen. Roots of light, vast and twisting, stretching down into the earth like the tendrils of the castle itself. core has extended its reach," Hermione whispered as they stood on the shore. "It's become part of the natural world again, the way it was before humans ever walked these lands." Harry gazed into the shimmering depths. Then maybe this is what Slytherin tried to stop. He feared it would grow too wild, too free, but this... He gestured to the water, to the light, to the humming all around them. "This feels right." That evening, the sun set in hues of green and gold. The air hummed softly, and for the first time, every soul in the castle could feel the magic. Not as fear or power, but as warmth. A gentle, pulsing presence that filled every corner of Hogwarts, from the highest tower to the lowest stone. And as the stars rose above the grounds, the core's song swelled into one long, perfect note. A chord that resonated through every window and wall, through every heart that called the castle home. The song of Hogwarts. Harry closed his eyes and let it wash through him. In that moment, he knew the castle would never again be only a place of stone and memory. It was alive, ancient and reborn, bound not just to him and his friends, but to all who would one day walk its halls. When the final note faded into the night, silence followed. But it was a living silence, full of promise. And though the years would bring new challenges, new shadows, and new light, Hogwarts would endure. For its heart now beat in time with the world itself. The weeks that followed were marked by wonder and quiet awe. Hogwarts had changed, yet in ways both subtle and profound. Where once the castle's stones had seemed cold and ancient, they now carried a faint warmth, a soft, living pulse. The air shimmered faintly in the mornings. Light lingered longer in the corridors, as though reluctant to fade. Even Filch, ever grumbling, had been seen pausing at a window to marvel at the green-gold sheen that danced across the lake. It was as though the castle itself had drawn breath again after centuries of stillness. The song of the verdant core, soft, steady, and eternal, seemed to hum in every wall. It was no longer a haunting, but a harmony, a quiet reminder that life had returned to the bones of stone. The students had grown used to it now. They called it the hum or the pulse, and many said they could sleep better because of it. But Harry, Hermione, and Ron knew that magic like this did not come without purpose. The core had awoken fully, and though it no longer trembled or split, its presence had grown vast, aware, sentient in its own ancient way. One misty evening, as twilight bled into dusk, they found themselves walking along the edge of the forbidden forest. The path was silver with dew, the air thick with the scent of pine and wet soil. The trees stood tall and watchful, their branches heavy with leaves that shimmered faintly green in the dim light. "The forest feels different," Hermione murmured. "Alive, yes. But listening." Ron glanced nervously toward the deeper shadows. "It's been listening to us for years. I don't like it any more now than I did then." Harry knelt by a patch of glowing moss, brushing his fingers lightly across it. The glow flared brighter at his touch, then dimmed again. "It's not just the forest. Everything around Hogwarts is changing. The land itself is linked to the core now, and the core's linked to us." Hermione nodded. "I've been thinking about that. The founders might have known it would happen again someday. Maybe they meant for the core to adapt, to grow with those who protected it." Ron sighed. "Great. So we've gone from saving the castle to babysitting it for eternity." Hermione gave him a look, though her smile was faint. "You say that as if it's a bad thing." That night, the castle dreamt. At least that's what it felt like. Students awoke to strange visions. Corridors filled with soft mist, voices whispering in forgotten tongues, the sound of footsteps echoing through unseen halls. No one could say what they had dreamed, yet all awoke with the same feeling. Something vast and old had brushed against their minds. Harry dreamed too. He stood again in the Chamber of Roots. Though it was no longer dark, the core shimmered before him, radiant with silvery light, its surface rippling like water. Within its glow, faint shapes moved. 4 figures standing in a circle. He knew them, though he could not see their faces clearly. The Founders. Gryffindor spoke first, his voice low and proud. "The bond has been restored." Hufflepuff's tone followed, gentle and warm. "And life thrives where once there was silence." Ravenclaw's eyes glimmered like starlight. "Yet beware the knowledge that stirs in the depths. Even balance has its shadows." Finally, Slytherin's voice came, calm, resonant, and no longer cruel. "Guard the heart you have mended, for all power, even pure, hungers for purpose." The vision faded, the light dimmed. When Harry awoke, dawn was breaking, pale gold, spilling through the windows. The hum of the core was still there, softer now, like a heartbeat, after a great exertion. But the Founder's words lingered in his thoughts. In the following days, the core's influence spread beyond the castle itself. The lake grew clearer than it had ever been, and silver fish leapt from the surface like shards of light. The forest flourished, trees thickened, flowers bloomed in impossible hues, and creatures once thought rare began to appear again. Even the centaurs ventured closer to the edge, watching the castle with cautious reverence. "This place is becoming a sanctuary," Hermione said one afternoon, as they watched the sunlight ripple across the lake. "It's like the magic of the core is calling the natural world home again." Hagrid beamed at her from nearby, holding a squirming, leaf-covered creature that looked part rabbit, part fern. "You're telling me? Been finding new species every week. The core's magic must have reached the forest roots. Look here, they're growing their own animals now." Hermione knelt to study the small creature. Its eyes glowed faintly, its body pulsing gently in rhythm with the hum of the castle. "It's alive, but not entirely natural. The core's energy is weaving life, blending magic with nature itself." Ron rubbed his temples. "That sounds like the sort of thing that goes horribly wrong in stories." Harry smiled faintly. "Maybe, but maybe this is the story where it doesn't." And for a time, it didn't. Weeks turned to months, and Hogwarts entered a new age of harmony. The castle and the land thrived together, bound by the living core. Students studied new forms of magic that bloomed from the soil, enchantments that grew like vines, charms that shimmered like dew. Professors wrote papers, the ministry sent inspectors, and soon whispers spread that Hogwarts had become the most powerful magical nexus in the world. But with power came curiosity, and curiosity always brings danger. One evening, as the spring rains swept over the Highlands, Hermione came running into the common room, her face pale. "Harry, Ron, you need to come with me, now." They followed her through the corridors, down into the lower levels of the castle. The air grew damp and heavy as they approached the old hatch by the greenhouses, the entrance to the Chamber of Roots. It was open. Green light spilled upward through the gap, brighter than before. "Hermione," Harry said, his voice low. "Who opened it?" "I don't know," she whispered, "but look." The roots that had sealed the passage now trembled, their edges pulsing with light. From within, a faint voice echoed, not dark or angry, but soft, pleading. Return, return. Ron's face drained of color. It's talking again. Brilliant. Harry stepped closer, the glow washing over his face. The core was calling. Not in anger, but in need. The pulse was unsteady, uneven. Hermione clutched his sleeve. Something's wrong. The balance we restored, it's shifting again. Harry looked down into the depths of the glowing tunnel. He could feel it. The pull, gentle yet irresistible, like the tide drawing him toward the sea. The core isn't finished, he said softly. It's changing again. Hermione's eyes were wide. Into what? But Harry didn't answer. The hum beneath the earth was rising, faster now, the melody trembling on the edge of something vast. And as they stood there, in the half-light, the voice of the core came once more, clearer than before. Not ancient this time, but young, new, and filled with the breath of awakening. Return to me, children of stone. The roots remember your hearts. The castle shuddered ever so slightly, and the light from below deepened to gold. Hogwarts was not only alive, it was becoming something more. Dawn broke over the highlands like a spell, lifting from the world. Mist clung to the turrets and towers of Hogwarts, curling around the battlements in slow silver waves. The air smelled of rain and green earth, and yet something deeper stirred beneath it. A quiet thrum, as though the very soil was awake. For several days the core had been restless again. Its glow seeped faintly through the cracks in the flagstones, and the hum that once comforted the students had grown strange and uncertain. The teachers tried to dismiss it as an echo of spring magic, but Harry knew better. So did Hermione. The core was calling again. They stood with Ron on the cliffs overlooking the lake, the morning wind tossing their cloaks. Below, the water shimmered faintly with veins of gold and green, twisting like serpents beneath the surface. It's changed again, Hermione murmured, her eyes wide, the magic spreading beyond the castle, into the valley, the forest, the lake itself. Ron frowned. And that's bad, isn't it? Not bad, she said slowly, just unpredictable. Harry crouched at the cliff's edge, watching the waves ripple. The core's not dying this time, it's growing, it's trying to connect. To what? Ron asked. Harry didn't answer. Somewhere deep within him, the heartbeat of the castle pulsed faintly, steady and sure. He could feel its rhythm, as if his own blood now carried a piece of the core's song. That night, the sky above Hogwarts turned green. Not the sickly hue of the dark mark, but soft and radiant, like the shimmer of sunlight through leaves. The glow spread across the grounds, touching every tree, every stone, until even the towers gleamed with living light. Students gathered at the windows, whispering in awe. The professor stood in silence, wands drawn but lowered, sensing no threat. And then from deep beneath the castle, a sound rose. Not the hum of the core, but a voice. It was not human, not truly, but vast and resonant, filling every corridor and chamber, awakened and awake still. Children of magic, hear me. The words reverberated through the stones, through the walls, through the hearts of everyone who heard them. In the great hall, torches flared. The enchanted ceiling shifted, no longer showing stars or clouds, but great roots, winding through endless darkness, alive and luminous. For ages I slept, and now I remember. I am not stone alone. I am the dream of the founders and the life they wove into these halls. You have rekindled me. Gasps rippled through the students. McGonagall stood frozen, her expression unreadable. Hermione's eyes were shining. It's speaking to us. To everyone. The voice continued, soft as wind, deep as the earth. Long I waited beneath the world. They built me to protect, to teach, to preserve. But magic is not still. It moves as rivers do. It grows, it changes, it remembers. You have restored the heart, and with it the bond between magic and life. The sound faded for a moment, replaced by a hush, so complete that even the portraits dared not speak. Then the voice returned, gentler now. Guard this gift, for as long as courage stands with wisdom, loyalty, with ambition, the roots shall thrive. Forget, and I shall sleep once more. And then the light dimmed, the roots vanished from the ceiling, the hum quieted into silence.
The great hall erupted into murmurs and cries of disbelief. McGonagall raised her wand, her face pale but resolute. Remain calm. Whatever this is, Hogwarts is not in danger. But Harry knew that wasn't true, or at least not the whole truth. The castle was alive now in ways it had never been before. Its soul had awakened fully, and like all living things, it would continue to grow. In the days that followed, Hogwarts changed again. New corridors appeared, not chaotic or twisting like before, but graceful, deliberate, their walls lined with faint carvings of trees and rivers. Doors opened to places that had never existed, small gardens beneath staircases, clear pools that shimmered with light, and rooms filled with ancient voices teaching lessons long forgotten. The castle was remembering itself. Hermione spent hours documenting every change, her quill scratching furiously across parchment. It's rewriting its own history, she told them one afternoon, excitement lighting her face. All the forgotten magic, the pieces lost through centuries, it's rebuilding them. The founder's spells, the early enchantments, even the original architecture. It's as though the core is healing time itself. Ron whistled low. Hogwarts is gone and given itself a makeover. Harry smiled faintly. Maybe it's just becoming what it was always meant to be. But not all who lived in the magical world saw it that way. By the end of the month, word had spread beyond the castle walls. The ministry sent envoys to assess the situation, fearing uncontrolled magic. Rumors spoke of ancient power reborn, of enchantments that could rival the greatest wizardry in history. When the officials arrived, Hogwarts itself reacted. The moment they crossed the gates, the ground shimmered and the air grew heavy with unseen force. Their wands flickered, their voices faltered. The castle seemed to watch them. McGonagall met them at the entrance, her expression firm. "You are guests here," she said. "Remember that the school itself is listening." The leader of the delegation, a sharp-faced wizard from the Department of Magical Infrastructure, sneered. "Buildings do not listen, headmistress." But as he spoke, the torches along the corridor flared bright green, and a deep, resounding heartbeat filled the air. Every wizard in the group froze. McGonagall's lips twitched faintly. "It does now." That night, when the officials had fled in uneasy silence, Harry stood once more in the courtyard beneath the stars. The air was alive with warmth, the scent of blooming ivy rising from the walls. Hermione joined him quietly. "Do you think it's over now?" she asked. Harry looked toward the castle. Its towers gleamed softly, windows glowing like watchful eyes. "Not over," he said, "just beginning."
The core no longer called for help, no longer trembled with imbalance. It pulsed in harmony, not as a secret beneath the school, but as its living soul, entwined with every student who would ever walk its halls. Hogwarts had become more than stone and memory. It was a being of magic, a guardian of knowledge and life, awake at last. Hermione's voice was soft. "It's beautiful." Ron joined them then, a biscuit in hand, crumbs clinging to his robe. "You two get sentimental far too easily. The place nearly killed us twice, remember?" Harry laughed, the sound echoing softly across the courtyard. "Maybe, but it was worth it." And as they stood there, the wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of the core through the night. Not warning, not plea, but song. The castle's melody rose once more, weaving through stone and sky, through lake and forest, through the hearts of all who called it home. It sang of courage and wisdom, of loyalty and ambition, of 4 who built it and 3 who saved it. And somewhere, in the echo of that eternal song, the voice of Hogwarts whispered one final promise, as soft as dawn breaking over the mountains. "As long as my children walk these halls, I shall never sleep again."